The Valori had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. In all that time, no species had ever defeated them in battle. No world had ever resisted their conquest for long. They were the masters of the Orion Arm, and every living creature in their territory knew to bow before them or face destruction. Their ships were massive, each one stretching 5 kilometers from bow to stern. Their hulls were made from a metal found only on their homeworld, stronger than anything else in the known galaxy. Their weapons could crack moons and boil oceans. A single Valori warship could destroy an entire civilization, and they had hundreds of such vessels that the Valori themselves were terrifying to behold. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, with thick scaled skin that could stop most projectile weapons. Their eyes glowed a pale yellow, and their faces showed no emotion that other species could read. They lived for centuries, and their oldest warriors had fought in countless wars, gathering experience that younger races could never match. Archon Telvrak was the supreme commander of all Valori military forces. He had held this position for 400 years, and in that time, he had personally overseen the conquest of 12 star systems. He had never lost a battle. He had never retreated. The very idea of defeat was foreign to him, like trying to imagine a color that did not exist. The Valori believed in one simple truth: the strong ruled, and the weak served. This was the natural order of the universe. They had proven this truth again and again, crushing every species that dared to challenge them. Some they kept as slaves. Others they simply wiped out, erasing all evidence that they had ever existed. On the day that changed everything, Archon Telvrak sat in his throne room aboard his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath. The ship was the largest in the Valori fleet, a mobile fortress that served as both his home and his command center. Servants moved silently around him, attending to his needs, while officers reported on the status of the Empire. A junior officer approached and knelt before him. Archon, our scouts have detected signals from an uncharted system. Electromagnetic transmissions, very primitive. They appear to come from a small world orbiting a yellow star. Telvrak barely looked at the officer. New species were discovered regularly, and they were always the same: weak, frightened, easily conquered. Send a subjugation fleet. 30 ships should be sufficient. Yes, Archon? What are your orders regarding the native population? Telvrak considered the question for a moment. Evaluate them. If they can serve as laborers, take them. If they prove useless, eliminate them. Either way, claim the system for the Empire. The officer bowed and left to carry out his orders far across the galaxy, on a small blue and green world called Earth. Humanity went about its daily life with no idea that their fate had just been decided by a being who considered them less important than insects. The Valori scouts had been watching Earth for several weeks. They observed the strange soft-skinned creatures who lived there, noting their small size and apparent weakness. The humans had no natural armor, no claws, no fangs. They could not survive in vacuum, could not breathe underwater, could not withstand extreme temperatures. By Valorous standards, they were among the most fragile species ever discovered. The scouts also noted that humans had spread beyond their homeworld. They had small colonies on nearby planets and moons, and they had ships that could travel between these outposts. But their technology was primitive compared to Valori standards. Their fastest ships took months to cross distances that Valori vessels covered in hours. Their weapons were laughable, barely capable of damaging each other, let alone threatening a properly shielded warship. Scout Commander Velmek prepared his report for the subjugation fleet. The species calls itself human, he wrote. They are physically weak and technologically inferior. They appear to have some form of organized government, but they waste much of their energy fighting among themselves. Estimated time for complete conquest: 1 planetary rotation. Recommended approach: Standard subjugation protocol. No special measures required. He transmitted the report and settled back to wait for the fleet to arrive. He felt no excitement about the coming conquest. It would be routine, just like all the others. The humans would resist at first, as all species did, and then they would break. They always broke. The subjugation fleet arrived 3 days later. 30 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, their sensors immediately scanning for threats. They found none. The human defenses were exactly as primitive as the scouts had reported. Fleet Commander Carvos stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the tactical display. The human settlements were concentrated on the third planet from the sun, with smaller outposts on the fourth planet and various moons. He would start with the outer colonies, destroying them one by one, demonstrating the futility of resistance. Then he would move to the homeworld and complete the conquest. All ships, he ordered, advance to the fourth planet. We will begin there. The fleet moved forward, unstoppable and supreme. None of the Valori officers felt any concern. None of them considered that this conquest might be different from the hundreds that had come before. On Earth, astronomers detected the incoming ships and sounded the alarm. Governments scrambled to respond, but there was confusion and disbelief. Many refused to accept that aliens existed, let alone that they were approaching with hostile intent. But some humans understood immediately what was happening. In military bases and research facilities around the world, men and women looked at the data and recognized the truth. Something was coming, something powerful and dangerous. And humanity would have to fight or die. Commander Daniel Hayes was 42 years old. A career military officer who had spent his life preparing for threats he hoped would never come. When he received the alert at his post aboard the orbital defense station, he felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. But his voice was calm when he spoke to his crew. "This is not a drill," he said. "We have incoming hostile contacts. Unknown origin, unknown capabilities. But I know one thing for certain. We are not going to let them take our home without a fight." His crew looked at him, young faces filled with fear and determination in equal measure. They had trained for this moment, but training could never fully prepare anyone for the reality of war god above them. The Valori fleet drew closer, utterly confident in its coming victory. They had conquered countless worlds. They had crushed every enemy. They believed they were the strongest beings in the universe. They had never encountered humanity before, and they had no idea what was about to happen. The Valori fleet reached the outer colonies in less than a day. Fleet Commander Carvos watched from his bridge as his ship surrounded the human mining station on Europa, one of the moons orbiting the large gas giant the humans called Jupiter. The station was small, home to perhaps 12,000 workers and their families. It had no military value. Carvos had learned long ago that destroying civilian targets first broke the spirit of resistance. "Open fire," he commanded. A single beam of concentrated plasma shot from the lead warship. It struck the mining station and vaporized it instantly. Where 12,000 human beings had lived and worked moments before, there was now nothing but expanding gas and debris. Carvos felt nothing. He had done this countless times before. The lives of lesser species meant nothing to him, but he had made a mistake. He had assumed that destroying a civilian target would frighten the humans into submission. He did not understand that for humans, such an attack would have the opposite effect. Commander Daniel Hayes watched the destruction of Europa Station from the bridge of the USS Resolute. His ship was Earth's newest deep space carrier, equipped with the most advanced weapons humanity had ever built. But compared to the Valori warships, it was small and weak. A fishing boat facing a fleet of battleships, Lieutenant Katie Morgan stood at the tactical station. Her face pale but her voice steady as she reported. "Europa Station is gone, Commander." All hands lost. The enemy fleet is not responding to our hails. Daniel felt something cold and hard form in his chest. 12,000 people, families, children, gone in an instant, without warning, without provocation. He thought of his own family back on Earth, his wife and 2 young sons, and he made a decision that would change the course of history. "All hands to battle stations," he said. "We're going to fight." His executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Ben Torres, stepped closer and spoke quietly. "Sir, we can't win this fight. Their ships are too powerful. Our weapons might not even scratch their shields." Daniel looked at the younger man and saw the fear in his eyes. He understood that fear. He felt it himself. But he also knew something that the Valori did not. "Maybe we can't win," he said, "but we can make them bleed. And maybe that will buy Earth enough time to prepare." He turned to face his crew, men and women who had trusted him with their lives. "I won't order anyone to stay. If you want to leave, take the escape pods now. No one will think less of you." No one moved. Katie Morgan looked up from her station. "Commander, with respect, shut up and give us a target." Despite everything, Daniel smiled. "You heard the lieutenant. Target the lead enemy vessel. Fire everything we have." The Resolute surged forward, its engines burning at maximum power. Behind it came 3 frigates and a squadron of 12 fighters that had launched from the Martian defense grid. It was a tiny force against 30 massive warships, but they attacked anyway. The first volley of missiles struck the lead Valori ship's shields and exploded harmlessly. The energy dispersed across the shield surface like ripples on a pond. On the Valori bridge, Commander Carvos watched with amusement. "The insects are fighting back," he said to his officers. "How entertaining. Destroy them." The Valori ships opened fire, their plasma beams slicing through space. 2 of the human frigates exploded instantly, their crews never knowing what hit them. But the others kept coming. Captain Lisa Brennan commanded the frigate Vigilant. She was 53 years old, a grandmother of 4, and she had served in the fleet for 30 years. When her ship's weapons proved useless against the enemy shields, she made a choice that no Valori could have predicted. "All hands, abandon ship," she ordered calmly. "Helmsman, set collision course for the nearest enemy vessel. Maximum thrust." Her crew stared at her in shock, but they obeyed. Escape pods launched from the Vigilant as it accelerated toward the massive Valori cruiser. Lisa stayed at her post, guiding her ship toward its final destination. The Valori tried to shoot the frigate down, but it was moving too fast, too erratically. The Vigilant struck the cruiser amidships, piercing the shields through sheer kinetic force and plowing into the hull. The collision ruptured the alien ship's reactor. Both vessels exploded in a ball of fire, visible from Marsdot on the Valori flagship. Carvos stared at his tactical display in disbelief. One of his ships was gone, destroyed by a tiny vessel crewed by beings he considered insignificant. This was not supposed to happen. This had never happened before. How? He demanded. How did they do that? No one could answer him. The battle continued. Pilot Ryan Cho flew his fighter through a storm of plasma fire, dodging and weaving with skill born from years of training. His fighter's weapons were useless against the enemy shields. But he had noticed something. The Valori ships had exhaust ports at their stern, and those ports were not shielded. He sent a message to his squadron. "I found a weak point. Cover me." The other fighters formed up around him, drawing fire while Ryan made his approach. His ship was hit twice, losing an engine and most of its weapon systems, but he kept going. He thought about his daughter back on Earth, just 3 years old, with his wife's eyes and his stubborn chin. "For you, baby girl," he whispered, and flew his damaged fighter directly into the exhaust port of a Valori destroyer. The explosion tore the Enemy ship apart from the inside. Carvos watched. Another of his vessels die and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. These humans were insane. They were throwing away their lives without hesitation, sacrificing themselves to destroy his ships. No species had ever done this. No species had ever been willing to die so readily. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Resolute drifted alone among the wreckage, its hull breached in a dozen places, its crew reduced by half. But 13 Valori warships had been destroyed. 13. Against a force that should have been swept aside like dust before a storm. Commander Daniel Hayes sat in his command chair, blood running from a gash on his forehead, and surveyed the battlefield. They had lost so many good people. Lisa Brennan, Ryan Cho, hundreds of others who would never see their families again, that they had hurt the enemy. They had proven that humanity would not go quietly into the night. The surviving Valori ships retreated to regroup, and Carvos sent his report to Archon Telvrak. His hands trembled as he wrote the words, knowing that he was delivering news that no Valori commander had ever delivered before. They had been stopped. They had been bloodied by a species that should have been nothing more than prey. On Earth, the news of the battle spread quickly. People watched the footage and wept for the dead. But they also felt something else, something that surprised even themselves. Hope. If the Resolute could hurt the enemy, perhaps humanity had a chance after all. Archon Telvrak read the battle report in silence. Around him, his advisors stood frozen, afraid to speak, afraid to move. They had never seen their supreme commander so still, so quiet. The Archon's yellow eyes scanned the words again and again, as if reading them repeatedly might somehow change their meaning. 13 ships lost. 13 Valori warships destroyed by a species that had never traveled beyond its own solar system. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. And yet, it had happened. "Explain this to me," Telvrak finally said, his voice soft and dangerous. "Explain how primitive creatures and primitive ships destroyed 13 of our vessels." Fleet Commander Carvos knelt before the throne, his head bowed. He had expected to be executed for his failure, but instead the Archon had summoned him to provide information. It was, perhaps, worse than death. "They sacrificed themselves, Archon," Carvos said. "They flew their ships directly into ours. They died to destroy us." Telvrak leaned forward. "They killed themselves? Deliberately?" "Yes, Archon. Multiple times. Their pilots aimed their vessels at our weak points and crashed into us. Their captain ordered her crew to abandon ship and then rammed her frigate into one of our cruisers. They showed no concern for their own survival." The Archon was silent for a long moment. In all his centuries of war, he had never encountered such behavior. The Valori valued survival above all else. A warrior who died had failed, no matter how brave the death. Only the living could claim victory. "This makes no sense," he said. "Why would any creature choose death when survival is possible?" An advisor stepped forward carefully. "Perhaps they are simply irrational, Archon. Lesser species often lack proper reasoning capabilities." Telvrak shook his head slowly. "No, watch the battle recordings. Their tactics were coordinated. Their sacrifices were strategic, aimed at our most vulnerable points. They knew exactly what they were doing." He paused, his clawed hands gripping the armrests of his throne. "They chose death because they believed it served a greater purpose. They died so that others might live." The concept was alien to him, but he recognized it for what it was: a different kind of strength. A strength he did not understand. On Earth, humanity was undergoing a transformation. The attack on Europa Station had shocked the world, but the Battle of Europa had done something unexpected. It had united humanity in a way that nothing else ever had. For centuries, humans had fought among themselves. Nations had warred over land, resources, religion, and ideology. Old hatreds had been passed down through generations, keeping humanity divided and weak. But the Valkyrie changed everything. Within days of the battle, world leaders met in emergency session. Old enemies sat together and discussed not how to defeat each other, but how to defeat the common threat. The President of the United States shook hands with the Chairman of China. The Prime Ministers of India and Pakistan embraced publicly. Differences that had seemed insurmountable suddenly became trivial in the face of extinction. The Global Defense Initiative was born from this unity. Every nation contributed what it could: soldiers, scientists, resources, technology. Factories that had produced consumer goods now built weapons. Universities that had researched commercial applications now worked on military innovations. The entire economic output of Earth turned toward a single purpose: survival. Admiral Nicole Reyes was appointed to command the combined forces of humanity. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, and she had spent 40 years serving in various navies around the world. She had seen combat, had lost friends, had made impossible decisions. Now she faced the greatest challenge in human history. "We learned something important in the Battle of Europa," she told her staff at their first meeting. "We learned that we can hurt them. Their ships are powerful, but they are not invincible. Their shields can be overwhelmed. Their crews can be killed. They bleed, just like us." A young officer raised his hand. "Admiral, with respect, we lost a lot of people in that battle. We destroyed 13 of their ships, but they still have hundreds more. How can we possibly win?" Nicole smiled grimly. "By fighting smarter, not harder. The Valkyrie expect us to meet them in open battle, ship against ship. That's how they've always fought, and they're very good at it. So we won't give them that battle. We'll hit them where they're weak. We'll strike and disappear. We'll make them fear every shadow." She pulled up a tactical display showing the damaged Valkyrie cruiser that the Resolute had managed to disable before the enemy retreat. "We also have this. The engineering teams are studying the wreckage right now. By the time the Valkyrie attack again, we'll understand their technology, and we'll use it against them, miles away." In a research facility buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, scientists worked around the clock on the captured alien technology. Dr. Helen Park led the team, a physicist who had spent her career studying theoretical propulsion systems. Now she was examining the real thing. Their faster-than-light drive is based on principles we theorized but never proved, she told her colleagues. They fold space itself, creating shortcuts between distant points. It's elegant, really. And now that we have a working example, I think we can build our own. Her assistant, a young man named Stephen Liu, looked up from his console. "How long will that take?" Helen smiled. 6 months ago, I would have said decades. But we've got every brilliant mind on Earth working on this, unlimited funding, and a very strong motivation to succeed. I'm thinking 1 year, maybe less. The Valkyrie had unknowingly given humanity its greatest gift, a reason to unite and a sample of advanced technology. In their arrogance, they had assumed that primitive humans could never reverse engineer Valkyrie science. They had never encountered a species so driven, so adaptable, so desperate. Commander Daniel Hayes spent 3 months in a hospital recovering from his wounds. During that time, he became a symbol of humanity's resistance. His face appeared on recruitment posters. His words were quoted in speeches. The story of the Resolute spread around the world, inspiring millions to join the fight. When he finally returned to duty, he was promoted to captain and given command of a new ship, the USS Defiance. It was the first vessel built using the new technologies developed from the alien wreckage, faster and more powerful than anything humanity had ever created. Katie Morgan served as his executive officer. She had lost her brother in the battle, a young pilot who had died covering Ryan Cho's final attack run. The grief had not broken her. Instead, it had hardened her into something fierce and determined. "The Valori are going to come back," she said to Daniel as they stood on the bridge of their new ship. "They're going to come back with more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. They won't underestimate us again." Daniel nodded. "I know, but we'll be ready. And this time, we won't just be fighting to survive. We'll be fighting to win." Across the Gulf of Space, Archon Telvrak was assembling the largest military force in Valori history. 500 warships, crewed by warriors who had never known defeat. He would crush the humans with overwhelming power, leaving nothing behind but ashes and memory. He still did not understand his enemy. He still believed that strength came from size and power and the willingness to dominate. He had not learned the lesson of the first battle. Humanity was not strong because of muscles or weapons or technology. Humanity was strong because it could adapt, because it could unite, because it could sacrifice everything for those it loved. The Valori believed they were the strongest species in the galaxy. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 2 years had passed since the Battle of Europa, and humanity had changed beyond recognition. The scattered, divided species that the Valori had first encountered was gone. In its place stood something new, a united civilization, with a single purpose and an unbreakable will. The human fleet had grown from a handful of patrol vessels to over 200 warships. Each one incorporated technology reverse-engineered from the captured Valori wreckage, improved and adapted by human ingenuity. They were not as large as Valori ships, but they were faster, more agile, and crewed by people who had everything to fight for. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance as it prepared for humanity's first offensive strike into enemy territory. His crew had trained for this mission for months, running simulations until they could execute every maneuver in their sleep. Now the time for practice was over. "All stations report ready, Captain," Katie Morgan announced from her position beside him. Her voice was calm and professional, but Daniel could see the fire in her eyes. She had waited 2 years for this moment. "Good," Daniel said. He looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew, young and old, from every corner of Earth, united by loss and hope and determination. "You all know why we're here. For 2 years, we've been waiting, building, preparing. The Valori think we're hiding, licking our wounds, waiting for the inevitable end. Today, we show them how wrong they are." He pressed a button on his command chair. "All ships, this is Captain Hayes. Jump to hyperspace on my mark. Remember your training. Trust your crewmates. And let's give these scaled bastards something to remember us by. Mark." The fleet vanished from normal space, folding the fabric of reality to cross distances that should have taken centuries. When they emerged, they were deep in Valori territory, at the edge of a massive military shipyard. The Valori had not expected an attack here. How could they? Humanity was supposed to be a primitive species, barely capable of interplanetary travel. The idea that humans could strike at the heart of the Empire was absurd. The 40 Valori warships docked at the shipyard had not yet activated their shields. Their crews were performing routine maintenance, secure in the belief that they were safe. They learned otherwise in the next 30 seconds. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that combined Valori plasma technology with human innovation. Beams of concentrated energy tore through unshielded hulls. Missiles designed to penetrate armor detonated inside engine rooms and ammunition stores. Ship after ship exploded, filling the void with debris and dying screams. By the time the Valori managed to raise their shields and return fire, half their ships were already destroyed. The surviving vessels fought back fiercely, but the human fleet did not stay to trade blows. They struck hard, then jumped back to hyperspace before the enemy could coordinate a response. the entire attack lasted less than 10 minutes. 40 Valori warships destroyed or disabled. No human ships lost. Daniel Hayes allowed himself a small smile as the Defiance emerged from hyperspace in friendly territory. They had done it. They had proven that humanity could strike anywhere, anytime, and disappear like ghosts. Over the following months, the pattern repeated again and again. Human fleets appeared without warning at Valori supply depots, military bases, and shipyards. They destroyed what they could and vanished before reinforcements arrived. The Valori called it cowardice, refusing to stand and fight a proper battle. Humanity called it smart. Admiral Nicole Reyes coordinated the attacks from her command center on Earth, moving pieces across a vast three-dimensional chessboard. She had studied the Valori carefully, learning their tactics, their culture, their psychology. She knew that they could not adapt to an enemy who refused to play by their rules. They're trained for direct confrontation, she explained to her officers. Their entire military doctrine is based on meeting the enemy head-on and crushing them with superior force. They don't know how to fight an enemy who hits and runs, who refuses to give them a target. One of her aides pulled up a report. Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from several Valori subject species. They've seen our attacks. They're asking if we can help them rebel against the Empire. Nicole's eyes widened slightly. This was something she had hoped for, but had not expected so soon. Which species? The Korath, primarily. They were conquered about 500 years ago. They've been slaves ever since, used for manual labor and worse. But they say that watching humans fight back has given them hope. Nicole was quiet for a moment, thinking. The Valori Empire was not just a military force. It was a system of oppression that stretched across dozens of star systems. Millions of beings lived under their rule, stripped of freedom and dignity. If those species rose up while humanity kept the Valori military busy. Respond to the Korath, she said finally. Tell them we can't send direct military support yet, but we'll provide what intelligence we can about Valori troop movements. And tell them something else. What, Admiral? Nicole smiled grimly. Tell them that the Valori called us weak. Tell them that we were supposed to be conquered in a day. Tell them that when you have nothing left to lose, you become more dangerous than your enemies can imagine. The Korath Rebellion began 3 weeks later. It was followed by uprisings among the Veltari, the Sen, and a dozen other subject species. Suddenly, the Valori were fighting on multiple fronts. Their forces stretched thin trying to maintain control of their crumbling empire. Archon. Telvrak watched his domain fall apart and felt something he had never experienced in 4 centuries of life. Desperation. These humans had done more than defeat his ships. They had shown his subjects that the Valori could be hurt, that resistance was possible. That hope was not foolish. He knew he had to end this quickly, before the rebellion spread further. He had to crush humanity so completely that no one would ever dare challenge Valori supremacy again. He assembled his final fleet, 500 warships drawn from every corner of the Empire. It was the largest military force in Valori history, enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. He would lead it personally, ensuring that there were no more mistakes, no more failures. We will burn their homeworld, he announced to his commanders. We will hunt down every human who has fled to other systems. We will erase every trace of their existence from the galaxy. And when we are done, their name will be forgotten forever. His commanders cheered, their confidence restored by the sheer size of the fleet. 500 ships against the humans' 200. Superior firepower, superior numbers, superior warriors. Victory was certain, but one advisor, an old Valori who had studied the human attacks carefully, remained silent. He had noticed something in the pattern of human strikes, something that troubled him deeply. Archon, he said quietly, Have you considered why the humans have been raiding our shipyards and supply depots instead of defended targets? Telvrak glared at him. Because they are cowards. They strike where we are weak. The advisor shook his head slowly. No, they strike where they can hurt us most with the least cost to themselves. They've been weakening us for months while preserving their own strength. Every ship we lose is a ship that will not be at the final battle. Every resource they destroy is a resource we cannot use. He looked at the fleet assembled in the view screen. They have been preparing for this moment. They knew we would gather our forces for a final assault. They have been waiting for us to put all our eggs in one basket, as the humans say. Telvrak dismissed the warning with a wave of his clawed hand. Then let them wait. Let them prepare. It will make no difference. We are the strongest, and we will prove it. The advisor bowed and said nothing more. But as he watched the fleet prepare to depart, he could not shake the feeling that they were marching into a trap. Far away, Admiral Nicole Reyes received word that the Valori fleet was assembling. She looked at the tactical display showing 500 enemy ships and felt a cold certainty settle over her. The final battle was coming. Everything humanity had done, every sacrifice, every victory, every loss, had been leading to this moment. "Get me Captain Hayes," she said. "It's time to end this." The Kepler system hung in the void between human and Valori space, a collection of barren planets orbiting a dim red star. It had no strategic value, no resources worth fighting over. But it was here that the fate of two civilizations would be decided. Admiral Nicole Reyes stood on the bridge of her flagship, the USS Liberty, watching the tactical display as her fleet took position. 200 human warships arranged in a defensive formation, their crews ready for the fight of their lives. Against them came 500 Valori vessels, the largest armada ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. She should have been afraid. By every logical calculation, humanity was going to lose. The enemy outnumbered them more than 2-1, and Valori ships were still larger and more heavily armed despite all of humanity's technological advances. But Nicole was not afraid. She looked at the faces of her bridge crew and saw determination, not despair. She thought of the billions of people back on Earth, watching and waiting and hoping. She remembered every battle, every sacrifice, every fallen hero who had brought them to this moment. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "the Valori flagship is hailing us. Archon Telvrak wishes to speak." Nicole nodded. "Put him through." The massive reptilian face of the Valori Supreme Commander filled the main view screen. His yellow eyes gleamed with confidence, and his scaled lips curled in what might have been a smile. "Human Commander," Telvrak said, his voice deep and resonant. "I am impressed that you have come to face us. I expected your kind to run and hide like the prey animals you are." Nicole met his gaze without flinching. "We're done running. Today, we settle this." Telvrak laughed, a harsh sound like grinding stones. "You cannot win. Look at my fleet. 500 warships, each one more powerful than anything you possess. Your resistance has been admirable, I admit. You have caused us more trouble than any other species in our history. But it ends now." He leaned forward. "Surrender, and I will grant your species a quick death. Continue to resist, and I will make your extinction last for generations. Your children will curse the day they were born human." Nicole was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, a warm and genuine expression that seemed to puzzle the Valori commander. "You know what I find interesting?" she said. "You've conquered dozens of species. You've ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. And in all that time, you've never once asked yourself a simple question. What question? Why do we fight?" Nicole stepped closer to the view screen. "You fight because you believe the strong should rule the weak. You fight for power, for dominance, for the joy of crushing those beneath you. But that's not why we fight." She gestured at her crew, at the fleet behind her, at the distant blue dot of Earth. "We fight for our families. We fight for our friends. We fight for strangers we'll never meet because we believe their lives have value. We fight because some things matter more than survival." Her voice hardened. "You look at us and see weak, soft creatures who should have been easy to conquer. But you don't understand us at all. We are not strong because of our bodies. We are strong because we love, and we will do anything to protect what we love." She straightened. "So no, HFY. We will not surrender. We will fight, and if we die, we will die knowing that we did everything we could for the people we care about. And when your empire is dust and your name is forgotten, humans will still be telling stories about this day." Telvrak's eyes narrowed. "Then you will die. All ships, attack." The Valori fleet surged forward, plasma weapons blazing. The human fleet held formation, absorbing the initial volley with shields that flickered but held. Then Nicole gave the order. "All ships, execute battle plan Omega." The human fleet did not meet the enemy head-on. Instead, they scattered, breaking into smaller groups that wove through the Valori formation like fish through a reef. They had spent years studying their enemy, learning their weaknesses. Preparing for this exact moment, small human corvettes darted between the massive Valori warships, targeting engine nacelles and shield generators. Larger destroyers coordinated their fire, focusing multiple beams on single targets to overwhelm defenses. Fighters swarmed like angry insects, exploiting every gap in the enemy formation. The Valori tried to respond, but their tactics were built for a different kind of war. They expected lines of battle, coordinated volleys, ships facing each other in ordered ranks. They had never faced an enemy that fought in 3 dimensions, that refused to stay still, that used their own size against them. Captain Daniel Hayes commanded the Defiance from the heart of the chaos. His ship danced between plasma beams, returning fire with precision that came from 2 years of constant training. Katie Morgan called out targets and threats, her voice calm and steady despite the destruction all around them. "Enemy cruiser coming about, bearing 270, she reported. "They're targeting the Liberty." Daniel's hands moved across his console. "All batteries, focus fire on that cruiser. We're not letting anyone touch the Admiral." The Defiance's weapons tore into the Valori cruiser, joining fire from 3 other human ships. The enemy vessel's shields collapsed under the concentrated assault, and its hull cracked open like an egg. 1 more enemy ship destroyed. Hundreds more to go. The battle raged for 12 hours. Both sides took terrible losses. Human ships exploded, their crews dying in fire and vacuum. Valori vessels met the same fate, their proud warriors screaming in disbelief as their invincible warships fell apart around them. But slowly, inevitably, the tide turned. The Valori were not prepared for an enemy that would not break, that kept fighting no matter the cost, that seemed to grow stronger with every loss. Their fleet began to fragment, commanders making independent decisions as their coordination collapsed. Archon Telvrak watched from his flagship as his armada crumbled. Ship after ship winked out on his tactical display, their icons changing from green to red to nothing at all. He had brought the might of an empire to crush a single species, and he was losing. "This is impossible," he whispered. "We are the strongest. We have always been the strongest." The old advisor who had warned him before stood nearby, his face grim. "Perhaps, Archon, strength is not what we believed it to be." The final blow came when the Liberty led a desperate charge directly at the Valori flagship. The Dominion's Wrath was the largest ship in the enemy fleet, but it was also alone now. Its escorts destroyed or scattered. Admiral Nicole Reyes commanded the assault personally, her small fleet of surviving ships pouring fire into the massive vessel. The flagship's shields held for a long time, longer than any other enemy ship. But even Valori technology had limits. When the shields finally failed, Daniel Hayes and the Defiance delivered the killing blow. A concentrated volley struck the flagship's reactor core, and the Dominion's wrath exploded in a ball of fire that outshone the dim red sun. Archon Telvrak died without understanding how he had lost. He went to his death still believing that the strong should rule the weak, never grasping that there were different kinds of strength in the universe. When the battle ended, less than 100 Valori ships remained, and they fled rather than continue fighting. The human fleet, battered and bleeding, held the field. Admiral Nicole Reyes surveyed the wreckage and felt tears running down her cheeks. So many dead. So many good people who would never go home. But they had won. Against all odds, against an enemy who had never known defeat, they had won. "Send a message to Earth," she said quietly. "Tell them it's over. Tell them we're coming home." The war officially ended 6 months later, when the last Valori military commanders surrendered to the combined human and rebel alliance. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years collapsed, its former subjects finally free. Humanity did not become conquerors. They became liberators, helping the freed species rebuild their civilizations. They shared their technology, their culture, their belief that every life had value. The galaxy would never be the same. Years later, historians from a dozen species wrote about the war. They analyzed tactics and technology, politics and propaganda. But they always returned to the same question: how did humanity win? The answer was simple, even if it took the galaxy a long time to understand it. The Valori believed that strength meant power over others, the ability to dominate and destroy. But humanity understood a different truth. Real strength was the mother working 3 jobs to feed her children. Real strength was the firefighter running into a burning building. Real strength was the soldier who gave his life for his friends. The Valori believed they were the strongest species in the galaxy. Then humanity arrived and showed them what true strength really meant. Not the strength of muscles or weapons or ships, but the strength of love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable will to protect what matters most. That was how humanity saved the galaxy. That was how they always would.